everyone, good morning. Today on Transform Tuesday, I'm going to try to get through levels and curves and show you why we use them, the differences between Photoshop and Lightroom, and why they're there, and what those differences are. And essentially try to get to the point where I can show you in Lightroom why curves are so powerful. So without further ado, let's get to it. So let's take a look at this image in Photoshop and evaluate some of what we're talking about here. So I have this image of just the wing of a this is a white-faced ibis, but I just love the coloration of the wings. So let's take a look at a levels adjustment. So I'm going to choose this levels adjustment layer that I have in place, and let's just take a look at it. So we have a black point adjustment. Black point adjustment on the levels adjustment layer allows us to adjust the black point of the image. The white point allows us to adjust that white point, and this is our input levels of that white point. So we're able to adjust the input levels of that white point, and we're allowed to adjust the midtones of that midtone colors. The midtones also adjust and can alter our white balance. So we use white balance quite a bit to adjust an image for white balance. So for example, in this image, using levels, I can use these three eyedroppers. And this eyedropper up on top will give us a black point. So I'm just going to adjust the black point based on that eyedropper. The white point based upon, say, this... let's see if we can't move this image over a little bit and choose something like this. It's the white point of the image. And then I want the midtones. And so the midtones of the image, what I'm looking for is something that is 50% gray. So, I may choose something in here, and of course that added too much red. So let me try something else. Let me try up in the middle on this stick. I'm looking for something that doesn't have, that is essentially 50% gray. And this actually looks pretty nice. It's a nice coloration and, very similar to what you would see in the sun on a white-faced ibis. So maybe I would choose to keep this. Now, these eyedroppers are very helpful in levels, and photographers and Photoshop users for years have used this. And why not? Because it's such a great advantage to have that. Now, what about curves? So what I'm going to do is turn this layer off, and I'm going to go to my curves adjustment layer. Now my curves adjustment layer has the same adjustments, but it has actually more potential to it. It has more possibilities for that adjustment. So what we have is we have an input black point. This is input. As long as I'm moving along this lower x-axis, this is my input point. So I can move my input point to the black. I can move my white input point and drop that down. You see the input point, instead of being at 255, is at 229. So there's one location. Now, the midpoint that we saw in a levels adjustment, if we go back to my levels, you see this midpoint point. In a curve, we're allowed to actually make our decision about where that midpoint is. So we could just grab a point in our curve and move it wherever we want, and decide on what coloration we're looking based on what that midpoint point is. So we're allowed to choose that on our own. And that's pretty powerful, but let me just reset this for a second. And what I'm going to do is just kind of go to here and move this back. Instead of choosing a midpoint randomly, we can choose the midpoint based upon basically a local node adjustment that we would refer to in Lightroom. And here it is, just this little finger movement. And so I'm going to choose this gray, 50% gray stick again, and I'm going to find that midpoint on my curve. Now I can just just use this point. If I undo that, I can just use that point and just kind of go up and down on my curve until I get the color that I like and say, yep, that's the midpoint that I want to use. So we can have just the one point like we would in a levels example, but we also have the ability to adjust other portions of this curve, which is the real strength of a curve, because now I can go to, say, for example, this darker blue, and I could say, look, I'd really like to bring those blues up. And this is just on the RGB channel, so it's taking and brightening those blues up, because this particular point on the curve is the same RGB value that this blue is indicating. Now I can take and do the same with, say, for example, this high point here, and I can pull that down and say, look, I want to add more reflective light to it, and I can add as many points to this curve as I want. Now I could also just go ahead and do something similar as I did to the curve, in that I could choose a dark point and choose a dark point, and then choose a white point and come back over and say, look, I really like the end of this stick for my white point, and come back over and say, all right, now what do I want for midpoint? And for midpoint, I could choose, any point in here, and it will do the full adjustment of my entire RGB layers. And you'll see that each one of not only my RGB has changed its input and changed its input on the black and the white, but it also has affected each of my RGB curves as well. So now we know that we can take and adjust things based upon individual channels. Now this is not unusual. We could do this in levels as well. If I were to go back over to my levels, you can see that in the levels I can choose the individual channels. But on the curves channel, it gives me a little more strength, because now I can choose, say, for example, a red channel, and then use my local node or my finger adjustment here of this eyedropper and choose this particular frame of red and say, look, I'd like to push that red. Or I would like to go to my blue channel and maybe take this blue and add some more blues into that blues. So now I have the ability to adjust individual channels based upon the RGB values and the colors in that on that particular channel. So it gives me a lot of flexibility, more flexibility than what I've had as far as using levels, which was one of the reasons that we have taken this into Lightroom. And in Lightroom, if I go to the develop module with the same image, you'll see that we don't have levels adjustments over here, do we? And if we open up the tone curve, which is the tone curve panel, you notice that I don't have my eyedroppers for midtones and dark points and all of that. Why is that? Why don't I have the adjustment eyedroppers like I would if I was doing a curves adjustment layer in Photoshop? And part of the answer comes back to this. If we go to the basic panel, they gave us a white balance eyedropper. So now I can go to the white balance eyedropper, choose my white balance, which is the midtone, and then I can use my black points and my black points and my white points to adjust things here with sliders, rather than using those eyedroppers that I would use in the curves panel. That doesn't mean that the curves panel has lost its value. And the reason that it is actually still quite powerful is that we have this local node adjustment tool. So now if I want to increase the reds, I can go to the red channel, and you see I have my red and my cyan available. And now I can go and say, look, here's the red, and I want to push the red in those feathers. And now I want to go to the blue, and I want to take the blue in this feather, and I want to make these blues even more, outstanding. So I have the ability to use this in a full image. So this adjustment that I just made here is affecting the entire image. And Now, I don't know about anybody else, but one of the things that got me very excited in the masking tools that Lightroom presented with us, in the fall, was that eventually, after like the second update or whatever, they incorporated um, curves into our adjustments for a mask. So let's think about this for a second. If I take and have this wing, and I want to adjust a particular color range. So let's say the blues. I can go to my mask and I can choose a color range. So now I do a color range and maybe choose this blue color. And so it masks, it does an auto mask and masks pretty much all of the wing, but it also gave us all of this information in the background. Well, I can subtract that on that mask by simply going and saying, look, let's get a brush and let's make certain that our flow is up and our feather isn't very high. And I'm going to just eliminate all of this stuff over here and say, look, quick mask, just don't affect this. So essentially what I'm going to be able to do is now use a curve to adjust a specific area. And that's what I'm going to be excited about, because now I can come down to my curves adjustment on that particular mask, use the strength of curve. So I can now, instead of just using the RGB, I can choose a blue channel, use the local node adjustment, turn off my show overlay, and then go to that same blue. And let's go ahead and just increase the blues in that particular local node area, that local adjustment area, because of this mask. So now that we've done that, we can also say, let's create a new mask and let's go to a new color range. And in that color range, let's go ahead and choose this red. And again, it's going to affect my twig, but again, I don't care, because I can quickly go to this range and say, look, let's choose a brush and eliminate any changes from this adjustment that I'm going to put on this selection through my mask. I'm going to now eliminate it on my entire image and just have it on my selection. So turn show overlay off, go to my red channel now, and then use my local node adjustment to, in fact, enhance those reds. Now, because we have multiple points on here, I literally can say, you know what, in the darks, I would like my reds to be a little bit bluer. And in the whites, I would like my reds to be a little bit brighter. So I have the ability to put multiple points on my curve in the red channel and base it upon the colors of a specific area instead of altering the entire image. The strength of that is just outstanding. It's something that that many of us professional photographers and editors have been dreaming of for years, to be able to do that on a curve, on a quick selection in Lightroom. And then I would just go ahead and label this, double click on it, and just call this the reds. And I would call this one down here the blues. And just to label those particular masks, right? I hope this has been helpful to you. Hope that it has helped to show you a little bit more about curves and understand curves a little bit more. The strength of curves is incredible. And if you enjoyed this little YouTube presentation, then please subscribe and follow. All those help, and they help to get more of my content out there, and I appreciate it all. Thanks, and have a great day.